The overhead lights in lecture hall B flickered uncertainly, as if they too were unsure what to make of the towering, six-limbed figure adjusting a set of optical sensors on its elongated head. Professor Velk of the Ekaran Institute of Adaptive Biology stood at the center of the room, gleaming under the dome's filtered skylight. Rows of students, mostly human, a few scattered interplanetary exchange scholars watched with a mix of curiosity and caution. Among them sat Parker Jance, slouched in the third row from the front, a half-dismantled DSLR camera in a pouch at his feet. Velk's translator unit buzzed to life. "Your species," the professor said, with the deliberate tone of someone about to make a point he believed to be devastatingly clever, "claims an impressive adaptability. You thrive in radiation zones, navigate toxic oceans, and survive your own culinary concoctions, but your nocturnal vision is laughably insufficient." Students shifted in their seats. Velk extended two thin arms and dimmed the lights with a tap on the console panel embedded in its chest. The room plunged into darkness. "I see all of you," Velk continued. "Perfect clarity, your retinal rods are primitive. Your military relies on technology to simulate what my species evolved naturally. I propose a challenge." Parker straightened. "A test. One of you versus me. A room, total darkness, navigation, object retrieval. Let us determine whose vision is superior." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Parker raised his hand. "Name, Parker Jance. You volunteer?" "Yeah, but I want 1 week to prepare." Velk's orb swiveled, denied. 2 days. Parker hesitated but nodded. "Fine, 2 days." Velk's chest console blinked once. "Agreed, you may use any passive, non-emissive technology. No active light emission, no assistance. You and I, 48 hours from now." With that, Velk strode out, leaving a trail of unsettled students and one very determined engineering dropout. Back in his shared workshop cubicle, Parker dumped the contents of his supply drawer onto the counter lens filters, cracked GoPro housings, stripped wires, a thermal diode from a busted home security cam. He muttered to himself, "No infrared LEDs, no active emissions, so I need something passive. Something that sees thermal differences without broadcasting." His roommate, a lanky geology major named Ren, poked his head in. "You're going to get creamed." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Ren shrugged. "Velk's got 6 eyes and can see heat signatures through walls." Parker rubbed his face. "I don't need to match him, I just need to be good enough to navigate. If I can spot warm objects' hands, footprints, anything, I might make it through." He opened a storage bin and pulled out the old Canon DSLR his uncle gave him 3 years ago. The lens was scratched, but the sensor was intact. He checked the specs again and smiled. CMOS sensor. Sensitive to near-infrared. If I stripped the IR blocking filter, an hour later the room smelled like burnt plastic and solder. The camera's lens lay disassembled on a microfiber cloth. Parker delicately peeled the anti-IR filter from the sensor assembly using a scalpel. It cracked. He swore under his breath. "Okay, plan B." He pulled a cheap webcam from a drawer, one of those low-end models sold in bulk. With a little coaxing, he cracked open its casing, revealing a tiny sensor barely bigger than his thumbnail. This time, the filter slid off cleanly. He connected the sensor to a breadboard, wired in a lithium pack, and routed the visuals through a salvaged VR headset. He slipped it on. The world turned into a grainy, ghost-like image, but heat outlines popped. His own hand glowed faintly. The room's corners showed residual warmth. "It's working." By morning, he'd bolted the whole contraption onto a welding goggle frame, wired a passive cooling fan to the side, and added a head strap reinforced with duct tape and stolen belt fabric. He tested it in the basement laundry room with all the lights off. He could see. 2 days later, the test chamber awaited him. The university had converted one of the subterranean maintenance levels into a maze of partitions and scattered objects. The rules: retrieve 3 items placed randomly in the dark. No sound guidance, no help, just vision. Velk stood at the entrance, already fitted with his own optical augmentations, biological, not mechanical. Parker adjusted the goggles. The VR screen flickered slightly. "Mr. Jance," Velk said, "I admire your confidence." "I admire your smugness," Parker replied. Velk tilted its head. "We begin on the signal." A countdown echoed through the chamber. Then silence. Parker stepped into darkness. The goggles lit his path in shades of blue and red. Heat signatures lingered on the floor. Someone had walked here recently. He followed the faintest outline of a footprint. A few meters in, he spotted something warm on a shelf, a small metal cube, still radiating residual heat from handling. He grabbed it and moved on. A crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the maze. Velk had knocked something over. Good. That meant it wasn't perfect either. Parker ducked under a low beam, nearly clipped his head, and found the second item lodged between two plastic drums. His hand brushed against it, a warm, rubbery sphere. One more. He pivoted, but his left foot slipped on a wet patch. His knee slammed into the concrete. The goggles jostled. Static. "Damn it!" He crawled to the side, propped against a wall, and yanked the battery pack cable. A loose pin. He reconnected it, and the image returned flickering but usable. His knee throbbed. He tried standing, winced, and leaned on the wall instead. He pulled a strip of cloth from his belt and wrapped it tight around his knee. The last object had to be near the center. He limped forward, every step jarring. The goggles began to fog. He clicked the cooling fan to high. A faint red shape appeared ahead, suspended mid-air. He reached up. A cloth pouch tied to a wire. He tugged. It didn't budge. He pulled harder. The wire snapped. The pouch dropped into his hand. A klaxon sounded. Lights flared. He stood, blinking. Velk emerged from a side corridor, clutching only two objects. The adjudicator stepped forward. Participant Parker Jance retrieved all three items. Time, 13 minutes, 20 seconds. Velk's sensors dimmed slightly. The adjudicator turned to Parker. "You win." Parker exhaled and slumped to the floor. His knee buckled fully beneath him. "What's wrong with your leg?" the adjudicator asked. "I slammed it. Think something's torn." "Medical?" "Yeah, probably." Velk approached, its head angling downward. "You constructed that device from scratch, mostly junk parts. Old camera headset, some rewiring." Velk paused. "You adapted an obsolete imaging sensor to perceive thermal gradients through passive retrieval." "Guess I did." Velk extended a limb. Parker hesitated, then took it. The alien pulled him upright with surprising gentleness. "You are indeed more adaptive than I anticipated." Parker winced as he tried to put weight on the leg. "Let's just say I hate losing." Velk nodded. "We may collaborate. Your design intrigues me." As medical staff arrived with a stretcher, Parker laughed. "Just promise me next time it's a chess match." Velk tilted its head. "I am unfamiliar with that game." "Then you're in for a surprise." Parker lay on a polymer examination table in the university's xenobiomedical wing, his leg braced in a temporary splint that pinched slightly behind the knee. Across from him, a translucent curtain pulsed with faint blue light, absorbing ambient noise. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something metallic, probably attributed to the tall, four-eyed physician currently poking his kneecap with a cool instrument shaped like a tuning fork. "Tell me again what you did immediately after the impact," said the physician, flicking the tool gently against Parker's tibia. "I wrapped it. Improvised tourniquet. Didn't want to risk hyperextension." The alien doctor. Cleverix, as labeled on the otherwise unreadable badge, clicked his inner mandibles together softly. "Tourniquet on a joint. Humans are so creatively incorrect." "Worked, didn't it?" Parker muttered. "You've put strain on the ligament complex. Two are overstretched, not ruptured. Lucky." "We'll inject a regenerant gel. No running, jumping, or dramatic exits for the next 6 days." Dr. Cleverix loaded a slender syringe with a viscous amber fluid and pressed it against the side of Parker's knee. There was a short sting, followed by a wave of warmth. "I can't afford downtime," Parker said. "There's a conference next week, and if you try to sprint before recovery, your leg will fold like a wet tent flap," Cleverix interrupted. Let the gel do its work. The curtain opened with a soft hiss. Velk stepped into the room, ducking under the doorway beam that had been recently raised after several complaints from taller species. "You have sustained damage," Velk observed, "but pass the test." "Fascinating duality." "I'm flattered," Parker said, "but unless you're here to offer painkillers, maybe give me a day." Velk ignored the jab and gestured toward the wall console. "I requested access to your visual apparatus. The design has been flagged by 3 departments. Your technique for repurposing non-military sensors is of interest." "Of course it is, because I didn't blow anything up." Velk's torso rotated slightly, a gesture Parker had learned was the Ekaran equivalent of concession. "You achieved spectral imaging without a mission. That's uncommon. Even the Varnaxi rely on active thermals." Parker sat upright, wincing slightly as the gel settled deeper. "You're not just here to congratulate me, are you?" Dr. Kleverick stepped back, folding his arms. "I'll allow 10 more minutes before I sedate him." Velk tapped its wrist console. A holographic projection bloomed above the bed, displaying a schematic of Parker's goggles. Not just the exterior internal wiring, sensor routing, even the cooling fan's amperage curve. "How did you get that?" "The workshop cameras recorded your build sequence." "The university owns the footage." "I didn't consent to that. You signed the event waiver." Parker groaned, falling back against the bed. "Fine, what do you want?" Velk's eyes adjusted, narrowing to a focused ring. "I want you to recreate the device publicly. In front of the Terran Ekaran Scientific Assembly, 3 days from now." "That's barely enough time to walk, let alone build that thing again." "You will not walk. You will demonstrate from a seated position," Velk said. "You will be compensated." Parker hesitated. "How much?" Velk didn't blink. 4,000 credits plus a lab stipend. Dr. Kleverick gave a low trill. "That's more than I make in a month." "I'll do it," Parker said immediately, "but I need unrestricted access to the robotics lab." Velk extended a contract on a shimmering data slate. "Signed." Parker pressed his thumb to the pad and the document dissolved into the university's central archive. "You're aware it won't go like last time," Velk added. "This will be recorded. Cross-species observers, standards must be upheld." "I'll wear a cleaner shirt," Parker replied. Velk took that as agreement and turned to leave. Before exiting, he paused. "You continue to surprise. I was not expecting that." "Good," Parker said. "Neither was I." 3 days later, the auditorium pulsed with a low-frequency hum generated by the Varnaxi translators. Rows of alien delegates filled the curved chamber, seating some with multiple limbs, others with no visible heads, and a few that pulsated gently in their containment suits. Parker sat at a central table, goggles disassembled before him. His leg was elevated on a cushioned bracket, and he wore a dark blue lab coat that didn't quite fit across the shoulders. Velk hovered nearby, speaking with a pair of diplomats from Mirren Prime, whose skin shimmered like oil on water. A countdown banner blinked from the domed ceiling. Parker adjusted the mic embedded in his collar and leaned forward. "All right. I'm going to walk you through how to turn a cheap webcam into a passive thermal viewer. No explosives, no black market parts, just junk and desperation." The Varnaxi representative raised a feeler. "Define junk." "Discarded electronics, devices nobody values anymore. That's where humans start inventing." He picked up the sensor board. "This is from a consumer webcam, not meant for thermal imaging. But if you remove the IR filter, just this thin little glass square, you open up access to a spectrum you weren't supposed to see." A ripple of interest passed through the crowd. The Mirren ambassador leaned forward. "You intentionally bypass built-in limitations. That's chaotic." "That's human," Parker said. "We don't wait for permission to make things better. We void warranties by instinct." He demonstrated removing the filter, using a scalpel and a magnifying lens. A nearby display projected the process at magnification. Next came the wiring. He soldered 3 leads to a power regulator, narrated his way through the voltage drop calculation, and connected the cooling fan last. "Why the fan?" a delegate asked. Cheap sensors overheat. You cool them so they don't fry mid-use. Why not use a better sensor? Someone else asked. Because this one was in my junk drawer. There was a pause, then a few amused murmurs. Velk stepped forward. He has completed the assembly. Activate the demonstration. The lights dimmed. Parker slipped the goggles over his eyes and fed the live signal to the overhead display. The screen turned into a view of the audience in thermal hues: red for warm-blooded, blue for lower temperatures. Some delegates gasped. A few ducked. You're seeing your own heat signatures, Parker said. No light emitted, no tracking. Just passive reception. The Mirren ambassador tilted his head. This technology violates no treaties. It is elegant. Which is another word for unexpectedly functional, Parker said. Velk approached, this time with a smaller data slate. You have received 12 collaboration requests. Also, 1 marriage proposal from the Kintari envoy. Parker blinked. Come again. They are intrigued by your resourcefulness, Velk explained. It is considered an admirable trait. I'm flattered, but I'm not ready for an interstellar commitment. The crowd began to disperse, conversations buzzing in a dozen languages. Parker leaned back in his chair, goggles still warm in his hands. Doctor. Cleverix appeared from the side corridor, holding a small med pack. You'll need another dose, he said. You've been sitting too long, blood pooling behind the knee. Parker extended his leg and the doctor administered a second injection. Still think the tourniquet was a bad idea? Parker asked. Extremely, but also very you. Velk remained nearby, watching the last of the delegates file out. You've made an impression, he said at last. Parker looked down at the mismatched screws holding the goggles together. Funny what you can do with leftovers. Velk tapped his console. We intend to offer you a research grant. Just like that. You demonstrated ingenuity without protocol. That is rare. Ekaran institutions are not built for surprises. Parker looked around the now empty auditorium, still faintly echoing with alien footsteps. He set the goggles on the table and exhaled. Then maybe that's exactly what you need. The early afternoon brought a dry, staticky breeze through the open panels of Engineering Bay 6, where the filtered Martian light fell in a dull amber wash across workbenches and spindly tool racks. Parker sat on a wheeled stool, his healing leg extended and wrapped in a soft exo-brace that clicked faintly with every rotation of the joint. Across from him, Velk hunched over a disassembled stabilizer drone, its legs twitching as diagnostics pulsed across a nearby monitor. You're assembling that backwards, Parker said, not looking up from the modified headset he was patching with a new thermal buffer. Velk rotated its upper limbs without glancing away from the drone. Incorrect. Ekaran's spatial orientation differs from yours. This is forward. You're putting the sensor behind the propeller shaft, precisely, to account for reverse drift during hover correction. Parker paused. That's actually pretty smart. Weird, but smart. Velk's eyes dilated slightly, which Parker had learned meant it was pleased. From the far end of the bay, a low scraping sound approached. A squat alien with 4 thick arms and no visible neck shuffled forward, pushing a cart laden with diagnostic tools. It stopped beside Parker and set down a compact scanner. You are Parker Jance. My designation is Glint. I was assigned to review your thermal unit for ambient deviation tolerance. Right, that's the heat resistance thing you emailed about. I do not email. I submitted a data capsule through the university mesh node. Sure, that. Glint extended a tool resembling a flattened claw and gently pried open the casing of Parker's goggles. Its touch was methodical, never hesitating. You use non-shielded copper for this junction. Why? Because it was the only wire I had with the right gauge. Not insulated. I wrapped it in foil from a food pack. Worked fine, Glint paused. And you consumed the food before reuse? Parker glanced at Velk. Yes, Glint, I ate the protein bar before using the wrapper. Acceptable proceeding. Velk closed a panel on the drone and watched as it lifted briefly off the table, hovered unevenly, then slammed back down with an apologetic beep. Progress is inconsistent, Velk said. You're using a human gyroscope, Parker reminded him. We don't build those for six-legged balance. Then assist me, my legs still healing. You require no legs to recalibrate software. Parker sighed and wheeled over, his exo brace scraping slightly against the concrete. Fine. Let's see what you've bungled. He tapped into the drone's stabilizer code, scrolling through the lines with a practiced eye. After 30 seconds, he pointed at a section. You're compensating for torque twice. Once in the core loop and again in the interrupt handler. That's why it's overcorrecting and face planting. Velk adjusted the code silently. The drone lifted again, this time holding a steady hover, then rotated smoothly before settling back down. Acceptable, Velk said. You're welcome. Glint handed Parker a data slate. Your device passes ambient deviation tolerance. I will submit documentation on your behalf. Thanks, Glint. Glint nodded once and trundled away, quietly humming a tune Parker couldn't place but was fairly sure was in 5/4 time. The bay fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the occasional hiss of compressed air through the tool lines. You are not formally enrolled in any degree program, Velk said after a while. Nope. Yet you possess technical capabilities beyond several of our certified students. That's what happens when you can't afford tuition. You get creative or you give up. You chose the first. Didn't see the point in the second. Velk turned slightly. Would you accept formal entry into the Adaptive Engineering Initiative? Parker blinked. That's a scholarship program. You need a sponsor. You have one. Velk held out a credentials module, its surface glowing with authorization sigils. Parker took it carefully. You're serious? You've demonstrated value. Bureaucracies are slow, I am not. He turned back to the drone, but Parker didn't move for a few seconds. Why me? Velk didn't look away from his work. You solved a problem with the wrong tools. That is the only useful skill in the universe. Parker exhaled slowly and pocketed the module. Time passed. The light through the wall panels shifted to a deeper gold. By mid-evening, the bay began to empty. A few stray students picked up half-finished projects and trudged out, exhausted and blinking at the sudden brightness of the corridor lights. Parker packed up the headset components and powered down his workstation, wincing as he pivoted on his leg, still stiff. He turned to see Dr. Cleverix entering from the side access tunnel, carrying a portable diagnostic wand and a roll of joint tape. Only when I forget it's there. Then remember. Sit. Parker sat on the edge of the nearest table and extended his leg. The doctor scanned it quickly, then began applying the tape with fluid, practiced movements. Your tissue has responded well to the gel, Cleverix said, but you've been overusing that joint. There's inflammation along the posterior capsule. I've had worse. You say that like it means anything. Cleverix wrapped the last layer and secured the end with a quick press of adhesive. Keep it elevated when idle, and no stairs. This whole base is stairs. Then hop or crawl, I don't care as long as you don't tear the joint again. Parker slid off the table, testing the weight. Less pain than earlier. He nodded once. You're cleared for light load bearing, but if I see you running after a drone, I'll sedate you and weld you to a chair. Velk looked up briefly. I would assist. Cleverix gave a long, slow blink. I believe you would. As the doctor left, Velk returned to the drone. Parker limped over and leaned against the table. You really think I can handle that program? You already are. The room dimmed automatically as the evening cycle began. Outside, the filtered Martian sky darkened to a pale violet. The last of the engineering staff cycled through the exit doors. Parker looked down at the goggles on the bench. He tightened one of the screws near the sensor mount and adjusted the focus ring. You know, he said, if someone had told me a month ago I'd be building thermal goggles for aliens and getting scholarship offers from a six-eyed technocrat, I'd have called them insane. Velk's upper limbs folded into a resting posture. Humans often mistake improbability for impossibility. That is your greatest flaw and your greatest strength, Parker grinned. That's supposed to be a compliment. It is what it is. They stood in silence for a moment, the faint hum of inactive machinery filling the space. Well, Parker said, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. Guess I better go fill out whatever forms come with this scholarship. They will be extensive figures. He limped toward the exit, pausing at the threshold. Hey, Velk. The alien looked up. You ever want to do another challenge, maybe something less likely to blow out my knee? Velk considered this. Chess, you mentioned it once. I have studied the rules. Parker laughed. Then I hope you're ready to lose. We shall see. And with that, Parker stepped into the corridor, the door sealing quietly behind him, leaving only the faint glow of drone diagnostics and the satisfied stillness of a challenge not just survived, but transformed.